the virgin saloon girl married a rancher, only to learn he was the man who killed her father. Her father had been the center of her world, a kind and hardworking man who had taught her everything she knew about honesty, courage, and caring for others. When he had passed unexpectedly, Clara felt as if the ground beneath her had vanished. The man who had protected her, guided her, and filled her life with laughter was gone, and she was left to navigate the world alone. Her mother had died when Clara was just a little girl, leaving her and her father to face life together. Clara had grown up quickly, learning how to cook, clean, and manage small chores that many children her age never had to think about. After her father's death, she realized that survival was not just about food or money. It was about finding strength she never knew she had. She could cry in the privacy of her small room, but once she stepped outside, she had to be strong. To support herself, Clara took a job at the town saloon. It was not glamorous work, and the saloon was a place of constant noise, laughter, and sometimes anger. The men who came in were rough, and the women who worked there had seen more of the world than Clara had. At first, she had been frightened, overwhelmed by the loud voices, the clinking glasses, and the smell of smoke and whiskey. But she quickly learned to hold her head high, to smile politely, and to keep her hands busy. She became known for her kind nature, her patience, and her willingness to listen to anyone who needed to talk. Even though she was young and still innocent in many ways, Clara had learned to see people clearly. She could tell who was honest, who was kind, and who should be avoided. She had little time for daydreams about romance or adventure, but she had a quiet hope in her heart that someday, someone might come into her life who could bring warmth and safety. She didn't need grand gestures or wealth. She simply wanted someone she could trust, someone who would treat her with respect and kindness. One sunny morning, as the town began to wake, a stranger rode into town. He was unlike anyone Clara had ever seen before. His clothes were neat, his hat polished, and his horse well cared for. The stranger's eyes were sharp but not unkind, and when he walked into the saloon, he carried himself with confidence. He approached the counter where Clara was serving drinks, tipping his hat politely. "Good morning, miss," he said, his voice smooth and respectful. "I'm Thomas. I've just come to town and thought I'd introduce myself." Clara felt a strange flutter in her chest. There was nothing threatening about this man. He smiled warmly, as if he had nothing but good intentions, and there was a gentleness in his tone that made Clara feel unexpectedly safe. She returned his greeting, offering him a drink, and they began to talk. Thomas was polite, asking about the town, the people, and her work at the saloon. Clara was cautious, not used to strangers showing such genuine interest in her life, but there was something in his demeanor that made her want to trust him. Over the next few days, he continued to visit the saloon, always polite, always considerate. He never raised his voice, never made rude jokes, and never pressured her in any way. The townspeople began to notice. They whispered about Thomas, saying he was a fine-looking man with a kind heart. Some warned Clara to be careful, but she found herself drawn to his honesty and the calm way he treated her. In a world where people often looked out only for themselves, Thomas seemed different. Clara began to look forward to his visits. She would straighten her apron and brush her hair, hoping he would come in, hoping she could catch a glimpse of his smile. It was a feeling she had never expected to have, an innocent excitement, a curiosity about what the future might hold. She started to imagine what it would be like to have someone to share her life with, someone who could make the days brighter and the nights less lonely. Thomas, for his part, seemed equally sincere. He would ask about her day, listen carefully to her stories, and offer kind words when she spoke of her father. He never pried into the more painful parts of her past, respecting her boundaries and giving her the space she needed. Slowly, Clara began to let her guard down. She realized that she could enjoy his company without fear, that she could smile freely and laugh without worrying about being judged. As the weeks passed, Thomas's visits became the highlight of Clara's days. She began to notice small gestures, a gentle touch on the hand when offering her a drink, a thoughtful question about her health, a compliment that felt sincere rather than flattering. Clara found herself sharing little details about her life that she had never told anyone else, speaking of her father, her dreams, and even her fears. Thomas listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. One evening, as the sun set over the town and the saloon filled with the soft glow of lanterns, Thomas asked Clara to step outside for a walk. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of the nearby river and the earthy smell of the fields beyond the town. Clara felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she followed him, her heart beating faster than usual. They walked in silence for a few moments, the sound of their footsteps on the dirt road mingling with the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. Finally, Thomas spoke. "Clara, I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've known you forever. You are kind, strong, and brave, and I would be honored if you would consider a future with me, not just a friendship, but something more." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had dreamed of love, of finding someone who could bring warmth to her lonely world, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel real, almost too wonderful to believe. She looked into Thomas's eyes and saw nothing but honesty, a genuine desire to care for her and make her life better. I, I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I've never thought anyone could want me like this." Thomas took her hand gently. "You deserve to be loved, Clara. You deserve happiness, and I want to give you that. I will not rush you, and I will not pressure you. I only ask that you let me show you what life can be when we face it together." Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. For the first time since her father's death, she felt hope. She felt that perhaps, despite all the pain and loss she had endured, there was still a chance for something good in her life. That night, under the soft glow of the setting sun, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future with Thomas, a future filled with kindness, laughter, and companionship. Over the next few weeks, their bond grew stronger. Thomas continued to court her with patience and respect, never asking for more than she was willing to give. The townspeople began to speak of their relationship with quiet admiration, noting the way Thomas treated Clara with care and how she seemed to blossom under his attention. Clara, too, began to feel a sense of security she had never known, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she had found someone she could trust completely. By the time the first snow of the season fell, Clara and Thomas had made a promise to each other. It was a simple promise, born not of grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but of mutual respect, understanding, and a shared hope for the future. Clara knew that life would always have its challenges, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face them with someone by her side. She had found a companion who valued her heart as much as her hands, and that was more than she had ever dared to hope for. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the wind rustle through the trees outside, Clara felt a warmth in her chest. She thought of her father, of the lessons he had taught her, and she whispered a quiet thank you. She knew that life would not always be easy, but she also knew that she was no longer alone. With Thomas by her side, she could face whatever the future held. And for the first time since her father's passing, Clara allowed herself to dream, not just of survival, but of love, hope, and a new beginning. After the wedding, Clara and Thomas settled into life on his ranch. The house was large, with wooden beams and wide windows that let in the sunlight. It smelled faintly of hay, leather, and the earthy scent of the surrounding fields. For Clara, it was a world completely different from the dusty streets of her small town. Everything felt new, exciting, and a little overwhelming. Yet, in the midst of the unfamiliarity, she felt a sense of safety she had never known before. Thomas had been nothing but kind and patient since their marriage. He taught her how to care for the animals, how to manage the household, and even how to ride horses properly across the wide open fields. Clara had learned to cook for herself and for the ranch hands, and she found a quiet pride in being able to contribute to their shared life. Each day brought small accomplishments, small joys, watching the sun rise over the fields, feeling the wind on her face as she rode, hearing Thomas's laughter echo across the ranch. At first, everything seemed perfect. Clara felt as if she had stepped into a life she had only dared to dream about. She was no longer just a saloon girl. She was a rancher's wife, a partner, and someone who belonged. People from the town would come to visit, and they often complimented the way she had adjusted so quickly to life on the ranch. Clara felt a quiet satisfaction in their praise, but more importantly, she felt happiness in her own heart. Thomas, for his part, seemed genuinely happy with her. He would help with chores, sit with her in the evenings by the fireplace, and ask her opinion on decisions about the ranch. He spoke kindly and thoughtfully, never raising his voice or showing irritation. In his presence, Clara felt seen and respected. She began to believe more and more that she had made the right choice in trusting him with her life. Yet, life on the ranch was not without its challenges. The days were long, filled with labor and responsibility. Clara quickly realized that managing the household, helping with the animals, and keeping the property running smoothly was harder than she had expected. She often returned to the house exhausted, her hands calloused and sore from work she had never imagined doing. But she found a strange sense of satisfaction in it. Each task she completed, no matter how small, made her feel capable and strong. She felt proud that she could contribute to the life she was building with Thomas. Despite the peace and routine, Clara began to notice small things that unsettled her. Thomas would sometimes flinch or grow quiet whenever she mentioned her father. Once, when she spoke about a letter from her family, he seemed tense, as if he were trying not to react. The ranch hands would sometimes exchange knowing looks when her father's name came up, though they quickly looked away when Clara noticed. These small moments made her uneasy, but she told herself it was probably just her imagination. Thomas had been nothing but loving, so why would she suspect him? Even with these little shadows, Clara tried to focus on the positives. She spent her days learning and growing, finding joy in the simple pleasures of ranch life. She learned to milk cows, feed chickens, and mend fences. She began to enjoy riding horses across the wide, open fields, feeling the wind in her hair and the sun on her face. There was freedom in the land, a sense of space that made her feel alive in a way she never had before. She often thought of her father, wishing he could see her now, proud of the woman she was becoming. Thomas, too, seemed to enjoy this life. He would often take her on walks across the property, showing her the spots where he liked to rest, the streams where the water was cold and clear, and the hills where the view stretched for miles. He spoke about his childhood, about dreams he had once had, and about the work he loved. Clara felt a connection to him in these moments, a warmth that made her heart feel full. She began to imagine a future with Thomas, one filled with laughter, love, and family. But as the days passed, the shadows of doubt grew heavier in Clara's mind. She could not ignore the strange tension that appeared whenever her father's name was mentioned. There were moments when Thomas seemed distant, almost lost in thought, and she noticed the way his hands would tighten whenever she spoke of the past. Clara tried to brush it aside, telling herself she was overthinking, that she was imagining problems where none existed. Yet the nagging feeling lingered, a quiet whisper that something was not quite right. One afternoon, Clara was cleaning the attic when she found a small box tucked away behind old furniture. Inside were letters, some in her father's handwriting, others in unfamiliar hand. As she read them, her heart began to race. They spoke of business dealings, disagreements, and conflicts with people she had never met. Most disturbing of all were the hints that her father's death might not have been an accident. The letters suggested threats, grudges, and danger, things Clara had never considered before. Her hands shook as she held the papers. Could it be possible that her father's death was not natural, not the result of illness or accident? The thought terrified her, yet she could not stop reading. Each word seemed to pull her deeper into a mystery she had never known existed. Clara felt a mix of grief, anger, and fear. She had always thought she understood her father, but now she realized there were secrets she had never known. Clara did not know what to do with this information. She could not tell Thomas, not yet. The man she had trusted with her heart might be involved, and the very thought made her stomach turn. She spent hours pacing the floor, trying to make sense of the letters, trying to find a clue, anything that could explain the words on the pages. The more she read, the more she began to suspect a truth she did not want to face. Despite the fear, Clara decided to continue observing Thomas carefully. She watched his reactions, the way he spoke about the past, and the way he interacted with the ranch hands. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. There were inconsistencies, small hints that something was amiss. Thomas was still loving and kind in many ways, but there were cracks in the surface, moments when his calm exterior faltered. Clara felt a growing tension between the life she had dreamed of and the reality she was beginning to see. At night, she would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She remembered her father's lessons about courage, honesty, and justice. He had always told her that the truth, no matter how painful, was worth seeking. Clara knew she had to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the man she loved, even if it meant discovering betrayal in the person she had trusted most. The thought filled her with dread, but also a strange determination. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began to piece together the fragments of the past. She would sneak moments alone in the office or the barn, going through old papers, asking discreet questions, and carefully observing the people around her. Each small discovery added to the growing tension, each new piece of information making her realize that the life she had entered with Thomas might not be as simple or safe as she had believed. Yet, even with the unease, Clara could not deny the bond she had formed with Thomas. He had been a source of comfort and warmth, and she did not want to let go of the life she had begun to build. The ranch felt like home, the work felt meaningful, and she had grown in ways she never imagined. She wanted to trust Thomas, to believe that he was the man she had thought him to be. But the letters, the hints, and the whispers from the ranch hands reminded her that trust must be earned, and that sometimes appearances could be deceiving. The balance between love and suspicion became Clara's daily struggle. She would laugh and talk with Thomas during the day, enjoying the moments of happiness, and then at night she would sit alone, studying the evidence and questioning everything she thought she knew. Her heart ached with the conflict between hope and fear, between love and doubt. She began to understand that life was not simple, that people could carry secrets and burdens invisible to the world. Through it all, Clara remained determined. She would not allow herself to be blinded by affection, nor would she abandon the life she had worked so hard to build. She learned to walk carefully, to observe keenly, and to trust her instincts. Every day brought new challenges, new discoveries, and new questions. Yet she also learned that strength could come from vulnerability, that courage could emerge from fear, and that the heart could carry both love and wisdom at the same time. By the time winter approached and snow began to fall over the ranch, Clara felt a new sense of resolve. She loved Thomas, yet she knew she had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. She had entered a new chapter of her life with hope and excitement, but now she realized that the path forward would not be simple. There would be trials, challenges, and heartbreak, but Clara was ready to face them, armed with courage, intelligence, and the memory of her father's unwavering guidance. The ranch remained quiet that winter, with only the soft sounds of animals and the wind through the trees. Clara would watch Thomas from a distance at times, studying his mannerisms, looking for clues, and trying to reconcile the man she loved with the man she suspected might be hiding dark secrets. She did not yet know what the truth would reveal, but she felt prepared to face it when the time came. And deep inside, she held on to the hope that love and honesty could somehow coexist, even in the most complicated of lives. Winter had settled over the ranch, and the world outside the windows was a quiet, snowy landscape. The days were shorter, the nights longer, and the cold seemed to seep into every corner of the house. Clara spent much of her time indoors, mending clothes, reading old letters, and reflecting on the growing unease she felt in her heart. Though Thomas remained outwardly kind and attentive, Clara could not shake the nagging feeling that something in his past was hidden from her. It had begun as a small doubt, a shadow in the back of her mind whenever her father's name was mentioned. Now it had grown into a persistent worry. Clara could not ignore the inconsistencies she had noticed in Thomas's behavior, the strange tension in his voice, and the way he seemed uncomfortable whenever the past came up. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself she was imagining things, but her instincts told her otherwise. One chilly afternoon, Clara decided she could no longer wait for answers to appear on their own. She had to investigate, even if it meant confronting painful truths. She spent hours in the study, going through letters, old town records, and anything she could find that might shed light on the mystery of her father's death. Each new document, each line of text, made her heart pound faster. It was as if the shadows of the past were slowly creeping into the present, demanding to be noticed. As she read, Clara began to piece together a troubling story. Her father had been involved in a disagreement with a man from the neighboring town. It was unclear what had caused the conflict, but the letters suggested threats, anger, and a sense of danger. Clara's mind raced with questions. Could Thomas be connected to this man? Had her father's death really been an accident, or was there something more sinister at play? The thought filled her with a mixture of fear and determination. She could not ignore it any longer. Over the next few days, Clara watched Thomas closely. She noticed the way he sometimes glanced at the letters she had left out on the table, the way his expression hardened whenever the topic of the past came up. She felt a knot in her stomach, a sense of dread that she could not explain. She had loved Thomas, trusted him with her heart, but now doubt had begun to shadow that trust. Every smile, every kind word seemed tinged with uncertainty. One evening, while Thomas was away checking the fences, Clara decided to speak with one of the ranch hands who had worked there for many years. She found him by the barn, feeding the animals and brushing the horses. His name was Samuel, and he had always been respectful to her, though he rarely spoke about anything personal. Clara approached him cautiously, unsure how much he knew, but hoping he could provide some insight. "Samuel," Clara began, her voice quiet but firm, "can I ask you something about my father? Something that happened years ago." Samuel paused, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Of course, Miss Clara. What is it?" Clara hesitated, then continued. "I found some letters, and they suggest that my father's death might not have been an accident. Do you know anything about that?" Samuel's expression darkened. He glanced around as if checking to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. "Miss Clara, there are things people don't talk about. Your father, he had enemies. Some were angry, some jealous, some looking for revenge, but I never thought it would come to this." Clara's heart raced. "Enemies? Do you mean, could Thomas have been involved?" she asked, her voice trembling. Samuel hesitated, then said cautiously, "I can't say for sure, but there are old stories, things that people whispered about your father and the night he died. I've heard some names, but you have to be careful, Miss Clara. Some truths are dangerous." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and resolve. She realized that the life she had entered with Thomas might be built on secrets, and that the man she loved might not be who she thought he was. Yet, she also knew she could not turn away. The truth, however painful, needed to be faced. She thanked Samuel and returned to the house, her mind swirling with questions and possibilities. That night, Clara sat by the fireplace, the letters spread out before her. She reread them, piecing together the timeline, the names, and the conflicts. The more she read, the more certain she became that Thomas had some connection to her father's death. The realization filled her with sorrow, anger, and confusion. How could the man she trusted, the man she had hoped to spend her life with, be involved in such a dark part of her past? Clara spent the next several days trying to reconcile her love for Thomas with the suspicion that had taken root in her heart. She watched him closely, noting the way he interacted with the ranch hands, the way he reacted to mentions of her father, and the small details that now seemed significant. Every gesture, every word became a clue, and Clara's mind worked tirelessly to understand what had happened. One afternoon, Thomas returned earlier than expected. Clara felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach as he entered the house. He greeted her warmly, as always, but she could not shake the tension that had grown between them. She decided that she could no longer wait. She had to confront him, to seek answers, even if it meant risking their relationship. "Thomas," she began, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart, "I need to ask you about my father. I've found some letters and I need to know the truth. Did you have anything to do with what happened to him?" Thomas froze, his eyes widening in surprise. For a moment he said nothing. Clara's heart pounded, the silence stretching between them. Then slowly he took a deep breath and looked at her with an expression she could not read. "Clara, there are things I should have told you a long time ago," he said quietly. "It's complicated and I never wanted to hurt you." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Complicated? Thomas, this is about my father. You've been hiding something from me my whole life. I need to know the truth." Thomas looked away, his jaw tight. He ran a hand through his hair as if struggling with how to speak. "Your father, he and I had a conflict long before we met. I didn't plan for him to die. But that night, things went wrong. I tried to make it right afterward, but I can't change what happened." Clara felt a wave of shock and disbelief wash over her. The man she had trusted, the man she had hoped to build a life with, had a role in her father's death. The love she had felt now battled with betrayal, grief, and anger. Her mind spun with questions, accusations, and confusion. How could he have hidden this from her? How could she have been so blind? Thomas stepped closer, his voice pleading. "Clara, I love you. I never meant for this to happen. I wanted to be honest, but I didn't know how. I wanted to start a new life with you, a life free of the past. Please try to understand." Clara's heart ached, torn between the man she loved and the truth she had discovered. She felt betrayed, hurt, and unsure if she could ever forgive him. Yet at the same time, she remembered the moments when he had been kind, patient, and gentle. She did not want to hate him, but she knew that trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. For the rest of the evening they sat in silence, the fire crackling in the hearth. Clara could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her, the reality of her father's death and Thomas's involvement settling into her mind. She realized that life would never be simple again. The man she loved was also the man connected to the greatest loss of her life. In the days that followed, Clara tried to process what she had learned. She continued her work on the ranch, went about her daily routines, and interacted with Thomas as if nothing had changed, but inside, everything was different. She felt a mixture of love, anger, fear, and confusion, emotions that tangled together in a way she had never experienced before. She knew she had to find a way to reconcile the man she loved with the man who had caused her pain, but she did not yet know how. Clara also realized that she could not face this alone. She needed guidance, support, and clarity. She began to write in a journal, documenting her feelings, her observations, and the facts she had discovered. Each entry became a way to understand her own heart, to sort through the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. She wrote about her father, about Thomas, and about the life she had hoped to build. Through writing, she found a small measure of peace, a way to face the truth without being consumed by it. As winter deepened, Clara understood that her life had changed forever. The discovery of Thomas's connection to her father's death had shattered her innocence, replaced it with knowledge she could not ignore. Yet, within the pain, she also found a spark of strength. She realized that she could face the truth, confront Thomas, and take control of her own future. She would not be a victim of circumstances, but a woman determined to find clarity, justice, and perhaps, eventually, forgiveness. The days grew longer as winter slowly began to give way to early signs of spring. Yet, inside the ranch house, tension hung like a heavy cloud. Clara felt it in every corner, the quiet in the mornings, the way Thomas moved through the rooms, and the subtle sharpness in his tone when he spoke. She could no longer ignore what she had discovered about him. The knowledge that the man she loved had played a role in her father's death weighed on her heart like a stone. Clara spent her mornings in quiet reflection, tending to the animals, cleaning the house, and managing the daily work that kept the ranch running. But even as she performed these familiar tasks, her mind was elsewhere. Each sound, each movement made her heart beat faster. The wind that rattled the windows sounded like a warning. The creaking of the wooden floorboards seemed louder, more ominous. Every time Thomas entered a room, she could feel the tension rising within her. For days, Clara tried to find the courage to speak with him directly. She wrote in her journal, trying to organize her thoughts and emotions. She wanted answers, explanations, and perhaps some kind of closure. But even as she wrote, fear held her back. She did not know how Thomas would react, and she could not predict what his words might do to her heart. Would he confess more? Would he deny everything? Or would he turn the blame onto her father, shifting the burden of guilt in a way that would only make her angrier? Finally, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Clara knew she could wait no longer. She found Thomas in the main room, polishing his boots by the fireplace. The soft glow of the fire lit his face, and for a moment she saw the man she had loved, the kind, gentle, and attentive companion who had made her feel safe. But the shadows of doubt and betrayal were stronger now than any memory of trust. "Thomas," Clara said, her voice firm but calm, "we need to talk, about my father, about everything I've discovered." Thomas looked up, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he set his boots aside and gestured for her to sit. "Clara, I was afraid this day would come," he said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I suppose we cannot avoid the truth any longer." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she sat down. "I need honesty, Thomas. No excuses, no explanations that hide the truth. Did you have anything to do with my father's death?" Her voice wavered, but she held his gaze steadily. Thomas took a deep breath, his eyes clouded with emotion. "Clara, yes, I was involved, though not in the way you might imagine. I did not plan for him to die. That night, things spiraled out of control. There was anger, a disagreement that should have ended with words, not actions. But mistakes were made, and your father, he was gone before I could fix it. I have regretted it every day since." Clara's chest tightened. The words she had feared were finally spoken aloud. Her hands clenched in her lap as she struggled to process them. "How could you hide this from me? From the moment I trusted you with my life, you carried this secret." Her voice rose slightly, tinged with hurt and disbelief. "Do you know what it feels like to love someone, only to learn they were connected to the greatest pain of your life?" Thomas reached out, his hand hovering above hers. "I know, Clara, I know, and I do not deserve your forgiveness. But I love you, and I have wanted to be honest with you for so long. I was afraid of losing you, afraid that the past would destroy the life we could build together. But you deserve the truth, and I will give it to you, no matter how much it hurts." Clara pulled her hand back, tears welling in her eyes. The room seemed to close in around her as she struggled with the mixture of anger, sorrow, and lingering love she felt for him. I loved you, Thomas. I trusted you. How do I reconcile the man I married with the man who was responsible for my father's death? Thomas lowered his gaze, shame and regret etched into his features. I cannot change the past. I cannot undo what happened. But I can be honest with you now, and I can try to make amends in any way I can. I know that will never be enough, but it is all I can offer. Clara's mind raced. She wanted to believe him, to find a way to forgive, but the betrayal cut deep. Every memory of their shared moments, every act of kindness, was now clouded by the knowledge of his involvement in her father's death. She felt torn between the man she loved and the truth she could not ignore. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Clara stood, pacing the room as she tried to calm the storm of emotions inside her. "I need time, Thomas," she said, her voice shaking. "I need time to understand, to decide if I can ever see you the way I did before. Right now, I don't know if I can." Thomas nodded solemnly, his shoulders slumping. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I will be here, and I will answer any questions you have, no matter how long it takes." Over the next few days, the tension in the house was palpable. Clara moved through her daily routines with careful precision, trying to act as if everything were normal. She fed the animals, cleaned the house, and tended to the chores, but her mind was always elsewhere. Every glance at Thomas, every word he spoke, reminded her of the revelation that had changed her life forever. Despite the strain, Clara also began to notice small details that reminded her of the man she had once trusted. The way he treated the ranch hands with respect, the care he showed for the animals, the moments of genuine affection he still offered her. These glimpses of his character made her heart ache with conflict. Could a person be capable of love and kindness while also being responsible for great harm? Clara did not know. One evening, as the first buds of spring began to appear outside, Clara decided to speak with Thomas again. She needed more answers, needed to understand the events of the past in detail. They sat together in the study, the soft light of the lamps casting shadows across the walls. Clara held the letters and documents she had discovered, determined to piece together the full story. "Thomas," she began, her voice steady, "I need you to tell me everything. Not just what happened that night, but why. Why were you involved? Why did you keep this from me?" Thomas took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "Clara, your father and I had a disagreement over land and business matters. It escalated faster than I could control. Words were said, actions taken, and I could not stop it before things went too far. I have lived with that guilt every day. I did not tell you because I hoped to build a new life, a life free of the mistakes of the past. I wanted to protect you, even if it meant carrying the burden alone." Clara listened, her heart torn. She could feel his remorse, could see the pain etched into his face. Yet the betrayal still lingered, a sharp edge she could not ignore. "You should have told me," she said softly. "I deserved the truth from the beginning. Trust cannot exist without honesty, Thomas. How can I move forward if I cannot trust you completely?" Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. "I know, Clara, I cannot undo the past, but I will spend every day trying to earn your trust, trying to show you that I am worthy of your love. I cannot ask for forgiveness, but I can ask for a chance to prove myself." Clara felt the weight of his words pressing against her heart. She did not yet know if she could forgive him, if she could ever feel the same love without the shadow of betrayal. But she also realized that running away from the truth would not give her peace. She needed to confront it, face it, and decide for herself what kind of future she could allow. In the following weeks, Clara and Thomas navigated a delicate balance. They spoke honestly, carefully, and with measured emotions. Clara asked questions, demanded clarity, and insisted on understanding the events of the past. Thomas answered with honesty and humility, revealing details he had once hidden, exposing his guilt, and expressing his desire to make amends. Through these conversations, Clara began to feel a small sense of control returning to her life. She realized that while she could not change the past, she could decide how to respond to it. She could choose whether to allow anger and betrayal to define her, or whether to find a path forward that honored both the truth and the possibility of hope. By the time spring fully arrived, the snow had melted, leaving the ranch bathed in sunlight and the promise of new beginnings. Clara knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, that trust would take time to rebuild, and that forgiveness was not something that could be demanded or rushed. Yet she also knew that she was stronger than she had ever imagined, capable of facing the painful truths of life without losing herself. For the first time since the revelation, Clara felt a flicker of clarity. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, questions, and emotional trials. But she had the courage to walk it, the wisdom to seek understanding, and the strength to confront the man she loved, and the truth he carried. Without losing sight of herself, spring had arrived in full, painting the ranch in shades of green and gold. The animals grazed calmly in the fields, the birds sang from the trees, and the air carried the gentle scent of blooming flowers. On the surface, the ranch seemed peaceful, but inside Clara's heart, a storm still lingered. She had faced the truth about Thomas, about her father's death, and about the betrayal she could not ignore. Now she had to decide how to live with this truth, how to rebuild her life, and how, or if, she could forgive the man she had once trusted completely. The weeks following the confrontation had been tense. Clara continued her daily routines, tending to the animals, managing the household, and riding through the fields, but she did so with a careful awareness of her emotions. Every glance at Thomas reminded her of the past. Every word he spoke carried a weight she could not easily shake. Yet despite the tension, she also noticed small signs of his genuine remorse, his quiet attentiveness, his careful words, and the way he tried, without forcing it, to prove himself worthy of her trust. Clara often walked alone across the fields, the wind in her hair and the soft earth beneath her boots helping to clear her mind. She thought about her father, about the lessons he had taught her, and about the life she wanted to build for herself. Her father had always emphasized courage, honesty, and the importance of standing up for what was right. Clara realized that those lessons now applied to her own life. She had to face the consequences of the past, make difficult decisions, and take responsibility for her own happiness. One afternoon, she returned to the house to find Thomas waiting on the porch. He looked hesitant, his posture careful, as if he were stepping lightly on fragile ground. When he saw her, he gave a small, tentative smile. Clara felt a flicker of the old warmth she had once known, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned that emotions could be both a guide and a trap, and she needed to remain steady. "Clara," Thomas began softly, "I know I cannot change what has happened. I know the past cannot be undone, but I want to do whatever I can to make amends. I am ready to accept whatever decision you make, even if that means letting me go." Clara paused, her eyes fixed on the distant hills. She felt the weight of his words, but also a strange sense of clarity. She realized that forgiveness did not mean forgetting, and love did not mean ignoring the truth. She had the power to choose her own path, to honor her father's memory, and to live in a way that reflected her strength. "I cannot forget," Clara said quietly, "and I cannot pretend everything is as it was, but I can choose how to move forward. I need to live my life in a way that feels right for me, that honors the truth. And I need to decide if that life includes you or if it must be without you." Thomas nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "I will respect your choice, Clara. Whatever you decide, I will accept it." In the following days, Clara took time for herself. She spent hours in the fields, caring for the animals, walking along the river, and reflecting on her own heart. She thought about her father, the lessons he had taught her, and the woman she had become. She realized that strength did not come from avoiding pain, but from facing it head-on. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. Clara also began to reach out to people from her past, seeking support and guidance. She spoke with Samuel, the ranch hand who had offered her quiet wisdom, and with a few trusted friends from the town. She shared her feelings, her doubts, and her hopes. Through these conversations, she found clarity and perspective. She realized that while she could not change the past, she could shape her future, and that the decisions she made now would define the life she would live. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Clara and Thomas sat together on the porch. The air was warm, carrying the gentle scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. Clara felt a mixture of emotions: sadness for what had been lost, anger for the betrayal, and a quiet hope for what could still be built. She looked at Thomas, seeing both the man she had loved and the man who had caused her pain. "Thomas," she said softly, "I have thought a lot about us, about the past, and about my future. I have realized that I cannot stay in a place where trust is broken, no matter how much love exists. I need to live my life with honesty and clarity, and I need to honor my father's memory by making choices that reflect my own values." Thomas's face fell, but he nodded, accepting her words. "I understand, Clara. I will respect your decision, even if it means I lose you." Clara took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of sorrow and relief. "I cannot be with you, Thomas," she said quietly. "I need to leave the ranch and return to my town. I need to rebuild my life on my own terms without the shadows of the past hanging over me." Thomas reached out, his hand brushing hers gently. "I wish I could change what happened," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am sorry for the pain I caused you. I hope that someday you can find peace and happiness." Clara nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, I hope so too. Goodbye, Thomas." The next morning, Clara packed her belongings carefully, making sure to leave the house as tidy as she had found it. She saddled her horse, feeling a mixture of sadness and determination. As she rode away from the ranch, the wind in her hair and the open road before her, she felt a sense of freedom she had not experienced in years. She was leaving behind pain, betrayal, and uncertainty, but she was carrying with her strength, wisdom, and the hope of a new beginning. Returning to her town, Clara found comfort in the familiar streets, the friendly faces, and the memories of her past. She returned to the saloon, not as a worker seeking survival, but as a woman who had faced the complexities of life, confronted betrayal, and emerged stronger. The work was still hard, but now it was filled with purpose and pride. She felt capable, independent, and ready to create a life shaped by her own choices. In the weeks that followed, Clara focused on rebuilding her life. She strengthened relationships with friends, engaged in meaningful work, and explored new opportunities. She found solace in her routines, joy in small successes, and a sense of peace in the knowledge that she had made choices true to herself. The memory of her father remained a guiding light, reminding her of courage, honesty, and the importance of standing tall even in the face of pain. Though the shadow of Thomas's betrayal lingered, Clara refused to let it define her. She learned that life could be complicated, that people could carry secrets, and that love could sometimes exist alongside betrayal. But she also learned that forgiveness, strength, and self-respect were hers to claim. She could honor the truth while still seeking happiness, and she could build a life grounded in integrity, resilience, and hope. One sunny afternoon, Clara walked past the saloon where she had once worked, pausing for a moment to watch the lively scene inside. The laughter, the conversations, and the energy of life around her reminded her that the world continued to move forward, and that she could, too. She felt a quiet pride in herself, a sense of accomplishment for having faced the darkest parts of her life and emerged stronger. As she continued down the street, Clara allowed herself to dream once more, not of a life without pain, but of a life where she could face challenges with courage, love herself fiercely, and embrace the opportunities before her. She knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but she also knew that she had the strength to walk it with her head held high. Clara's story became one of resilience, courage, and self-discovery. She had loved, lost, and faced betrayal, yet she had chosen a path that honored her values and her heart. She had learned that the truth, no matter how painful, was a foundation for freedom and growth. And though she had left behind a love that could never be fully reclaimed, she had gained something far more precious: the knowledge that she could shape her own destiny, guided by honesty, integrity, and the memory of her father's unwavering love. In the end, Clara's journey was not just about loss or betrayal, it was about transformation. She had faced the most difficult truths of her life, made courageous choices, and stepped into a future defined by strength, wisdom, and hope. The ranch, the past, and the man she once loved became chapters in a story that ultimately belonged to her, a story of resilience and the power of the human spirit to overcome even the deepest pain.